Just a couple of things. You know, it is vacant, but there's still possessions in there. So when you come in, please take off your shoes, and you know, don't be touching the stuff in there. A couple of things that we're looking for in the property itself. We always start on the outside. It's a bit of a gloomy day, so let me walk you through real quick. With the speed of the Toronto market, we don't always have the luxury of having an inspection. Always best.
Coming closer.
Yeah, so you can hear. Yeah, coming closer.
Always best if we can get it, but if we can't, we try to identify at least some of the major potential problems ourselves first. So first thing that we would do is, you know, I kind of stand back here, and we're looking just for straightness within the property, right? Yeah. So, you know, making sure that the walls are straight. We're looking for any bowing, so you can stand down the side of the house, look down the edge, and we're trying to see if we're seeing any bowing in the walls. All exterior walls are structural, right? And we're seeing bowing. So, you know, we're trying to take a look out for any sort of bowing in the exterior walls themselves, because that's an indicator of problems. The other thing is, on a day like today, the nice thing about it being rainy is we can see sometimes the movement of water. So any water we see running down the walls is bad. Pooling near the foundation is going to be bad. So we're trying to keep an eye out for that stuff. Because, you know, this is more of a turnkey place. We don't want to be going through and gutting the property to add in waterproofing to manage that. Looking at overall grading, and you can see here that the grading is moving away from the property, right? So we've got a slope here, which means when it rains, you know, we're going to have the movement of the water itself. Other things about the location as well. I don't know if you guys can hear, there's a GO train line. It's right behind us. It's going through right now. That's also an up station. So you get the kind of the combo benefit. So we like the location a lot. And we like that it's not a pass-through, because the pass-through is where you get the roar of the train coming. At the stations, you get the bell, but it's a little bit quieter, right? And we also have this development here, which is blocking a lot of the noise. This is community housing. Any questions before we go inside and get a little bit more dry?
Hold on, does everyone have a name tag and a nice fun activity sheet? Yes? All right, let me know if you don't.
Cool.
Yeah.
The other thing I'd note is, so that this place looks pretty straight. They've painted the brick. That's a bit of a pet peeve of mine. Brick is a permeable material. You shouldn't be painting it. When you paint it, you seal in moisture. Water gets behind. It starts to, in the wintertime, will freeze, cracks, and it actually breaks the brick. So sometimes you see these homes with like chunks of brick missing. Oftentimes it's somebody painted brick they shouldn't have.
It's called spalling.
Oh, there's a name for it? Wow, there you go.
I actually know something.
Yeah. So you get spalling of the brick, there you go.
So how many people, do we do a count?
I think we're about 20-ish.
No.
You can just like cut it right down the middle.
Okay. we're gonna cut Dan down the middle. Half of Dan goes in this group.
We'll break up the couple or something.
Hey, Ming, sorry, one question from Oscar over here.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. This is more about the neighborhood itself. So how would you categorize this neighborhood, taking into account that there is social housing opposite?
Yeah, so big thing for our business model, and we haven't dived deep into the business model. We have like a whole ton of stuff online that don't want to keep you all out here in the cold too long. But basically, one of the major factors is access to transit. We have excellent access to transit around here, and access within about a 25 to 35 minute into the downtown core. So that's a big one. The immediate area, do I like that it's next to social housing? No. Like, I think it would be better if it wasn't.
Don't say that too loud.
I know, that's why I'm like, low. But it does have a bit of an impact on the property values. But what you'll have is an impact on acquisition, so it'll be a bit cheaper, and on deposition, you're going to be paying a little bit. You're going to get less. Right?
If I may, we could talk about areas and other associated business model type of aspects at the future venue. And what we want to focus on right now is the property itself, the physical attributes and features of the property itself. So we can definitely talk about those things. We can just save that question until maybe when we all when we go have a beer later.
This is a reverse day. You know more. You knew one thing about construction, and that you're actually moving things along.
I'm usually on a monologue that no one can stop.
So how about you guys go upstairs and I'll
So
take this group
we're gonna
downstairs.
split here. I think me and Wilson are gonna take which side?
Downstairs. Main floor.
Main floor is here, right?
I know there's both floors. Yeah. And then upstairs, we'll go upstairs. It's tight in there, so just be forewarned.
Okay. So this is a unit at the top level, a unit in the main, and then a unit in the basement. So, like, just on paper alone, you would think that this is a triplex, right? Yeah. But a lot of people, or a lot of listing agents, would call it a legal triplex, and they put that on the listing. But in reality, legal is actually, I'm saying in quotes, because there's 4 different pillars that you have to go through in legal for legalization.
Question number 1.
Yeah.
On your activity worksheet.
Yeah. Is this what is the legal status of the property? So the first thing you really have to look at is the zoning, right? Zoning is really zoning is the city's development. What I hate to say it, like
Yeah, it's the way that the city influences development in a particular area.
right? The 4 self-contained units. But there's a lot more to it. There's building codes you have to go by. You have to go by the fire code. You know, if there's a sprinkler system involved. Basement ceiling heights, setbacks, all that sort of stuff. You have to check all those off in order for it to be legal.
So you can go up. You can build up to 4 units.
4 units, yeah.
With a permit, but you don't need to go. You don't need to get the city's approval.
You do it by right of way, like it's 4 units.
Yeah.
So,
Single family.
but how does that work with Bill 23 then? Because Bill 23 allows you 3 units. You just need to make sure that everything's correct, and the city has to approve it.
So a lot of residential zones actually allow, and especially the areas we service, and the areas that we invest in, you can go up to, as of right, 4 units.
In Toronto?
In Toronto, in a lot of these zones, in the residential zones. There's new legislation that's literally going through, literally as we speak right now, which is changing a bit of that. And we're going to kind of take that information, we're going to distill it down and disseminate it out to the community once it's all ratified and approved. But literally, there's changes that are happening right now, and really that's to allow 4 residential units, Toronto citywide. In our areas, we've already mostly had that ability. Where you need to ask for approvals are mostly on variances. Variances, right? The zoning actually allows it. Remember, zoning is just the city. You know when people say, "Oh, is it legally zoned?" That's a wrong word to use. What the hell is legally zoned mean? That actually is a wrong word to use. It is what you need to be thinking about is what is the city's recognized use of that particular property, right? And so that's where it comes down to building permits. It comes down to interior building code, fire code, and then sometimes you see 3 or 4 self-contained units on MPAC, for example.
Yeah.
Right. So
It's a bit more nuanced than that, right? Like when you're looking at variance and fire code, like for example, fire code requires two methods of egress, right? That way you need to have a separate entrance through the basement, right? So if your home doesn't have a separate entrance, you have to punch in an entrance, and then you need variance, and you have to go to the committee to get that. So let's just go in there because we're taking too much time. So what we're looking for, really, in investments, really, is an ideal layout, right? This is a 1-bedroom property, a layout. Normally, we'd want like a deeper lot so you can squeeze in that extra bedroom. Because when you get that extra bedroom, you get more rent. You get more rent, the yields make sense, the business model makes sense, right? The general framework is more bedrooms, the more yield we could get. But there's actually a sweet spot to it. The 2-bedroom layouts are the ones that we target. 3 is a bit better. When you get to about 3, your tenant profile changes at that point. You're looking at some younger families, and they may stay a bit longer than you'd like. the tenant profile that we're aiming for is young professionals, right? And the reason for that is they naturally turn over. When they naturally turn over, then you keep up with the market rents, right? We don't really want a tenant that will stay there for a long time. Like that's their only choice, is to be a tenant forever, right? We want that tenant that will go on with the next stage of their life. They'll find a partner, then they'll go on to their next home. We say professionals too, because if you have a tenant that gives you a lot of trouble, then you'd have to go to land LTV and put in order to garnish their wages and all that sort of stuff. When it's a professional tenant and they work for a big firm downtown and they're going for that big promotion, they don't want their employer knowing, hey, I'm not paying my rent, blah blah blah, et cetera, et cetera. And we're not in the business of kicking people out. We don't want any of that stuff. We just want the natural turnover of a tenant. Yeah. All right. That's the only spiel I have here. But look at the finishes that we have here. With that tenant profile, what we're looking for is upgrades and finishes like stainless steel fridge, stainless steel appliances, backsplash, quartz countertops. I don't even know if it's quartz countertops, but you're looking at these types of things that you look at the Starbucks of renos, really, right? It's good enough to buy just by naked eye, but it's not very expensive to actually to have it in place. It's not a custom home that we're getting into, right? We're not going for that artisan propeller coffee. We're looking for Starbucks level upgrades. Yeah, that's the best way to describe it.
Let's start with just first impressions, things I like and don't like. Whenever we're looking at properties, we're really focused on what can we and can we not change about the house. Obviously location, we'll talk about that at the brew pub, but ceiling heights are a big one, right? While I can change ceiling heights, it's very expensive, very difficult to do, so I don't make sure that's good. Here on a second floor, this is actually pretty good. Oftentimes when we start getting into second, third floor, we lose 8 feet. We're down to like 6-ish feet, so that can be a little bit tight. Other thing here is the general layout. It's not too bad. The kitchen's relatively open to the common space with the 1 bedroom over there. We prefer 2-bedroom layouts if we can, generally because there's a big jump between 1-bedroom rents and 2-bedroom rents. 2 and 3 are great. We get diminishing returns once we get past 3. So if we're into like 4, we don't really see 5, but if we're kind of like in a 3+ or 4, then it doesn't really work too well because you're paying a bit premium for the property, but you're not necessarily seeing that back in rents. Finish levels. So it's relatively turnkey. Our business case is predicated around finding young professionals, kind of their mid-20s and mid-30s. This is pretty good. The appliances could be a little bit nicer. The cabinetry could be a little bit nicer. Flooring could be a little bit nicer as well. This is like $2 a square foot laminate. If we were redoing this, we'd be looking at, let's say, like a $4 or $5 vinyl plank, like something a little bit higher grade. What else here? The lighting, we would, if we were doing this ourselves, we'd have kind of pot lights, we'd smooth out the ceiling. So it's not too far off, but it's also not where we'd want to be to get the top rents. Now, we don't want to over renovate as well. As you noticed, I mentioned like kind of like $3 to $5 ish vinyl plank. We're not going up to real hardwood, for example. Our tenant profile doesn't really care. They want it to look nice and you need it to be durable. And if you start putting in real hardwood, you lose that. Countertops, we're kind of looking at $50 to $60 square foot quartz. It's a laminated product right now, but what we are basically competing against are condos, right? So it's got to be kind of like that entry condo level finish. That's what we're looking for. Do you guys have a familiarity with like what is legal and not legal?
No.
Okay. It's like a soapbox for me. so there's no such thing as legal. I shouldn't say there's no such thing. It's a terrible term to say something is legal or illegal because it doesn't actually help or tell you anything. you have to be two things. You're code conforming, which means my property is up to Ontario Building Code, and you're zone conforming, which means I'm allowed to have the type of residency in this area as governed by bylaws, right? So I need to be both code and zone. If I am both code and zone, then I am quote unquote legal. So how do we know? So what we do as part of our research is we'll look through the MPAC status. MPAC is your beloved taxation organization. And they often have listed what type of status the property is. Now, status in MPAC does not equal code conforming, does not equal zone conforming. They're all separate databases because government is awesome that way, right? But if somebody's paying extra taxes for like a triplex or a fourplex or whatever it happens to be, there's a good chance that the property has some sort of legal status with the city, because why would you be paying extra taxes unwillingly, right? Or so while it's not a 100% match, it's I would say like a 80-90% match. The only way to know for sure is to do a city search, right? Take the property, go down to City Hall, get them to run a city search, wait 2 weeks, and get the report back. If you notice, I said wait 2 weeks. So practically speaking, in this Toronto market where things sell in days, you don't have 2 weeks time, which is why we rely on MPAC status. Also, you can't do a city search on a property you don't own without the owner's authorization. So you can't do it anyway unless the person who's selling this place writes you a letter that allows you to do it. But oftentimes, after acquisition, we'll double check with the city. So far, so good. 100% of the places that we've executed on, there's been a match. But it is not the same database. Okay.
And what issues could you find in that report?
So the city search just tells you the status of the property. So it is possible that you have, duplex, triplex status in the property here, but then you go down the city and it's only single family, right? That would be like a worst case type scenario. We have found the opposite. So we bought a place that was like duplex. We went down to the city, it was actually registered as triplex, right? Because typically people who have multifamily are trying to keep their taxes as low as possible, so they don't want to tell MPAC. So you'll see sometimes the other way happening more often, but it's not as common. You'll see it being triplex, fourplex, and MPAC, and then less status with the city. Why do we care? Because if you are both zone and code conforming, you cannot be shut down. You are running the property as of right. One of the big caveats, though, is the City of Toronto is not actively trying to shut places that are not fully legal down. And what I mean by fully legal, zone conforming, because they're going through this massive effort to make multifamily properties easier to develop in the city. Toronto is one of the leaders in this space. They want places to be safe. So if you're gonna get shut down for being not code conforming, right? They want to see fireproofing. They want to see interconnected fire alarms. They want to see fire exits if you have dwelling units above 6.5 meters. Like all that kind of stuff they care about. Okay. Any other questions? Chris.
Ming, I have a question. What about why do I care as an investor for legal versus non-legal for mortgage qualifications?
Chris, are you sure this is not staged?
Yeah.
I've never seen them.
That's an excellent question. And it wasn't even planted. Okay, so we care about this because if you are not, so they call it non-conforming, which means you don't conform to one or the other. Typically it's zoning that it's not conforming to. If you're not zone conforming, when you're going through mortgage qualification, your rents won't necessarily all be counted, right? So if you have a fully legal property, 100% of your rents are counted. If you have a non-conforming property, usually only 50% of your rents are counted. Okay.
Are they looking for a documentation that shows that? Like, how are they checking?
So they're checking using MPAC.
So
Yeah.
MPAC.
The banks typically go on look at MPAC as well. Yeah. Last thing is the outdoor space here. Really nice to have, especially since COVID. It's like a big plus. People still remember being kind of trapped inside their homes. And a lot of people are working from home these days. So if you have a property with an outdoor space, it's very nice.
It's pretty tight here. Yeah.
For these types of homes, where would the water be? And do you know if this is separately here?
Where would the water be?
Yeah, like is there one tank for the whole?
I believe this one is one tank, yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be in the basement.
Okay.
You're talking about the boiler, right?
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Probably basement. Yeah.
In the basement, yeah.
And do you know if this one's separately?
I am not sure, actually. We can find out.
I'm gonna guess no.
Yeah, I'm gonna guess no too.
It's not the most sophisticated multifamily.
Yeah. It is, right? Yeah. So what I was talking about before too with legal status, 3 units, it should be a triplex, but it's actually not, in MPAC status is not triplex, it's listed as a duplex. Probably because the basement is not to code. Like there's not 2 separate egresses, there's sprinkler systems not hooked up, like interconnected. They just have the unit here, main floor, unit upstairs, so it's a duplex.
But what is it zoned, what is this area zoned for?
Well, it's not by areas, everything's residential, right?
Okay.
But this home in particular is a duplex because they had it as two
And then
separate
it's
units.
just like a legal duplex?
It's a legal duplex, yeah. That's important from a financing perspective. So if it's MPAC says it's a duplex, the rents that you get, and Tyler could probably talk about this, he's our mortgage specialist, is that they'll actually recognize, what, 80% of the rents if it's a duplex? If it's legal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's different lenders, like I can just super quick talk about it for a few seconds. I mean, different lenders have different rules, right? The zoning is obviously very important. If it's zoned as a legal triplex, you're gonna have a lot more lending options as opposed to if it was zoned as a duplex with a rental unit in the basement, right? We do have some lender partners and it's only a handful, really not that many, like one that we really go to a lot, that is cool with having, zoning not be for the use of the building, right? If it's a duplex with a rental unit in the basement, it's fine, but to get all access to most financing, you're gonna wanna have legality as close to what the use of the building is as possible, right?
So I missed part of that, but I know that a lot of several lenders don't know the depth they don't have the depth of experience that we have necessarily, and will accept a lot of the status on MPAC.
Yes.
So here's a ninja level shit here. There's a difference between what's stated on MPAC. I don't want to say a difference. MPAC is not the authoritative and definitive source. The city is, from a financing perspective. A lot of lenders will not need the legal status from the city. That's a different source altogether. Not everyone knows that there's a difference. So MPAC is not always correct, but it can still work in your favor in a lot of times for financing. Sorry if I jumped in.
No, it's perfect. Yeah.
Can it work against you if MPAC says the opposite, says duplex, even though?
But then if a legal status with the city, you can go to the city, get the legal status, and then present that. That would override MPAC.
Is there a reason? So could this third unit be legalized, or is it just that?
What is this one?
This is a duplex.
So
it's a duplex within a legal third unit, basically.
So yes. So not every.
Potentially yes. Yeah.
Not every property can be turned into a triplex easily.
Yeah.
Right? So there's things like limiting, like you need certain side setback from your neighbor. Like you need 90 centimeters from the neighboring property. And there's other things like that. There's gonna be like ceiling height requirements, methods of egress, fire requirements, all those types of things. Zoning generally will allow it, but you may not be able to get it. You still, for example, you're supposed to have n-1 parking spots. So n being the number of units. So if you don't have 2 parking spots, technically you can't. Even though zoning allows it, your particular property, the city may not permit the use of a legal triplex. But that's where you might go to community adjustments for variance. So the answer is it depends. We will be looking at certain things, basement ceiling heights, and like a whole bunch of other things to determine those things, to see whether there's high degree of certainty, whether we can turn it into a triplex or not. And we have a method in doing so, working with architects. We have a team of architects and engineers. We know how to navigate the city to get it to legal. But there's lots that are duplex +1, 2+1, and there's lots that are not even duplex. 95% of the triplexes in Toronto are not legally recognized by the city. Generally, it's not a problem until someone calls. Usually the problem sources are usually tenants, disgruntled tenants and disgruntled neighbors. Those are your two primary sources.
Go ahead.
Why would you purchase a non-legal?
How do you, on the market, unless you're building it yourself, there are very, very few, and you pay a premium for it. So availability, the premium might drive the price to the point where it no longer makes financial sense for you, right? May push you from cash flow positive territory to cash flow negative territory. If you can get legal, great. If you can get something that's non-legal and you think you have the operational excellence to turn it into legal, great, right? So there are reasons why you would also not purchase it non-legal. But the reality is you could be waiting months and months and months and months and months until you find something legal, and then there are 25 offers on it. And then you're SOL again, right?
SOL?
Shit out of luck.
No, this is a real estate accident.
It's technical.
Cool. Any questions about the property? Let's continue through. So we had some questions around and garage in the back.
Oh, garage in the back, yeah. So, yeah, this is not, the floor's not level here, right? Matt, you want to actually talk about the leveling?
So this, depending on, like, we'd have to take a look.
It's an extension.
So that's solid, right? And this is, so that's the difference between, well, like literally an exterior wall, but when you do a tap like that, that can also be an indication of a load-bearing wall, right? But this looks like this is like that is fucking solid.
That's right.
Which means that this part, there's a high degree of certainty that this is an extension. And this extension, depending on, like, we can go outside and observe and we can take a look at the foundation, but chances are it wasn't built properly. Maybe it was built on stilts. Like, literally, I've seen lots of interesting shit, right? And what we have here is a pretty significant slope. You can feel it, right? You could go skiing on this. So a pretty significant slope. It leads, so this is one of those kind of areas of concern, especially, you know, if you get a home inspection or whatever, this is something that they'll point out. And it's being reflected also in the cabinetry. So what we're looking for is we want, you know, generally speaking, when we acquire places, we want places that are good structurally, generally speaking, foundations, you know, waterproof, dry basements, you know, pretty good ceiling heights in the basements. We want to avoid big ticket items as much as possible, especially if we're coming in and, you know, we want this thing to be turnkey, or we want to only do a light reno. If you're doing a massive reno and it's part of your operational excellence and part of your business strategy to come in and add that value, great. You can buy anything in any condition. That's what this guy does, right? And then turn it into something great. But if you want to keep that renovation price tag down, structural is a very expensive thing to fix, right? So this gives me some concern, right? So you can feel the slope here, and that, generally speaking, is going to be a very expensive fix. There are big ticket items, very big, you know, you want all your systems. The house actually works as a system, right? So the waterproofing of the house and the ceiling of the house is a system. Literally, the roof works together with the eavesdrops, works together with the soffits and the downspout and grading to discharge water away. Right? Water is one of our big things that we want to avoid.
Matt, have you noticed that, like, not only does it slope this way, it slopes that way too?
I haven't been this way.
That's just a height difference.
Well, I mean,
the tile is not that much higher.
What I'm trying to figure out is this might actually just be the transition point. I don't know if this is necessarily a slope or just how they, like, when you lay tile from other flooring, sometimes the tile can be a bit higher, and so that could be a transition. This may or may not.
I think it is. It looks like it's a
transition.
Yeah.
Okay. So it could be a level. It could be like a grading, sloping thing, or it could be just a transition between flooring, right? So anyway, that's around this.
Do you guys know what laneway and garden suites are? So basically, if you look behind here, there to get into your garage and park your car, you have to get into a lane, and it's like a small street, runs all the way down behind all the properties, and people park their cars. Well, part of solving the housing crisis in the city is to turn those garages into real homes. So the services are run from the main house, and you build a secondary property at the back. They're called laneway when they sit on a lane. They're called garden suites when you don't have a lane at the back. So before we came here today, we did some work with our partners at Lanescape to see if it's eligible. While we've got a lane back here, it's not eligible. Okay. This is a big mistake that we see a lot of investors make, is assuming that because you have a laneway, you can have a property back here. There are a lot of requirements as to what allows for a laneway development. In particular, we exceed what's called the 90-meter rule for this property. And what I mean by that is fire hoses are 45 meters. So the calculation is 45 meters from a fire hose plus a pumper truck, and then another 45 meters to the property. So if you're 45 plus 45 and you're not at your laneway or garden suite, you can't develop there, right? Also, because we're very tight against the sides here, we can't come through the side of the house. There's a minimum setback requirement for all safety egress of 90 centimeters. So side setbacks, we need 90 centimeters. Hallways, we need 90 centimeters. Staircases are 90 centimeters. That's the requirement. We don't meet that here with the building next to us.
So remember that was one thing, the other thing I talked about is you're trying to get more yield, more rent out of your property. So you want to get it to the highest and best use. Another thing that we're focusing on is laneway suites. That's a relatively new thing in Toronto. I think it's 2018 that it was, the bylaw was passed. Who's here from Uptown? Was like, yeah. So people will know that your garage is usually in the front of your house, and you come in through the front. Downtown, you have lanes that go to your garage access, and with that, the bylaws allow you to have a laneway suite, but there's caveats to that, right? You have to have 7.5 meters setback from your main house to your laneway house. So a lot of lots don't have enough depth, and if your house is extended, you won't have enough clearance setback from the main house. This one looked attractive to us because you have the setback from the main house. For those of you who haven't poked their head outside, you need 7.5 meters, and you have lane access. Those are two big checks that we looked at. But when you actually run a laneway report, it requires you to have access to the front of the curb and then 45 meters to the next fire hydrant. And for that, it's because the emergency services have to have access to the laneway suite. This one, the closest fire hydrant that could get to is 217 meters. So it's not gonna work. Looks good on paper.
We just got that report.
We just got that report. It looks good on paper, but in actuality, you can't build a laneway house here.
So the curb is on the other side?
Yeah.
Or like, is there a road back there where you can have access?
That's a lane.
Oh, that's
There's
a lane.
back
Oh,
there.
okay.
Yeah.
That's the lane.
Yeah.
The fire hydrants are going to be on the actual roads.
Okay.
Right, the streets.
Yeah.
So in front of this house, in front of that house. So depending on, is this a semi or
This is a detached.
this is detached?
Yeah.
Okay. So I mean, part of what they look for too is enough side setback. So maybe there's all these different requirements.
Yeah.
So if you have enough side setback, then maybe you don't need the fire the 90 meters plus the 45 meters to try to. So there's all these different things to look for. We can check off things at a very high level, but what we want to do is after they check off the very high level things, we send for a report.
Yeah.
And so we have strategic partners we work with who will help us provide that high level analysis that gives you the confidence when you're putting in an offer of whether you think you could do this. Because something like that, a wrong assumption could make or break your business model completely. The other thing we look for is trees. So
No large trees.
no large trees here.
So what's a large tree? So a large tree is a meter from the ground up, and then if it's 30 centimeters in diameter, greater than 30 centimeters in diameter, that's considered a large tree, and you have to get a permit to get that removed.
Any other questions? Anything else here?
So they have parking
They do?
they have
Yeah,
parking.
they have that at the back.
at the back? Okay, it's for one or two?
I bet you on the listing it says 2. But in real life, you're probably only fitting 1.
Cozy.
That
Yeah,
one-
cozy too.
Cozy part.
It's not, this is not the parking.
It's the blue structure right there?
This is the parking.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a garage.
How old is this house, or why would you be worried about like structural things in the
So
everything building?
pretty much every house we're looking at in the neighborhoods that we want to be in because they're close to the city is 100 years old or more, right? My guess, just looking at this property, we're dealing with at least a century home here. But sometimes they built a couple of these in the mid-century, which had similar layouts. Things that we are looking for is, so because they're so old, we actually don't have to worry as much about like UFI or asbestos because some of them are just before that time. Sometimes they've been retrofitted in. Things that we care more about are like structural sagging, right? So here you'll get in every one of these houses you go through in Toronto, you'll get saggy floors, right? But we're talking about like serious movement in the property, tilt and lean. And a lot of that can be seen like foundational issues. You can see in the basement as well. So we're looking for like cracking, water penetration, crumbling, that kind of stuff. And when we get the chance to have a home inspection, we bring through people who are familiar with these old homes, because somebody who's inspecting a brand new condo or brand new construction is not the same skill set as somebody who is looking at a rubble based foundation. You guys may have never even seen a rubble based foundation. It's literally dirt around the property that they gathered up and stuck together with lime, and that's your foundation. So.
Meg, I guess got a question from
Yeah.
James back here.
What's the lot size and are there a lot of infill development around there?
I don't know what the lot size is. I remember it being a bit narrow. Chris, do you know?
Maybe 17, maybe.
17? 17 is not too bad actually. We'll see how good my eye is, but my guess is about 100, 105 maybe depth, and then we'll see how right I am. Sorry, there's a second part to your question.
Infill developments, are there a lot of infill developments?
So infills, no, not in this neighborhood, right? Because if I'm an infill developer, I need square footage, right? The way I get my money back is to put as big a possible home on the property as I can. And here the lot size is not really advantageous for an infill developer. If I wanted to do that, I'm going, maybe south and east of us where the lots are a little bit bigger. Plater Estates in East York, Kingsway in Etobicoke, North York. There's pockets of the city which you'll see a lot of infill development because the lots allow for them to put on like a $3 million McMansion, right?
Would you say upgrading the electrical in these old homes is like mandatory? Especially when it's like a turnkey, you don't know what's behind the walls?
So, yes, I mean in terms of safety, right? So when you're looking to buy these places, you want to make sure that the electrical that's within the property itself is copper, right? I think that's really important. And when we're looking through them, we often look at the panels, right? Because panels need replacement. It's much easier to do. It's $5,000, changing a new panel. But yeah, you don't want to be buying a place that has knob and tube, unless you're planning on gutting it.
I mean, how concerned would you be about like the various wall damage in here and ceiling damage with the stucco?
Sorry, May. Let me.
Up there and the cracking.
Oh,
and
okay. So there's a little bit of water damage. That's probably what that is. Likely the roof at some point in time was leaking and they did a crappy job of fixing it. If you've ever tried to patch stucco, it never quite looks the same. You have to really remove all of it and then redo it again. And that's very much a patchwork job. Would I be concerned about it? I mean, in 100-year-old homes, there's always something, right? And it needs to be, is it something I can manage or is it something I can't, right? So if it's a, smallish leak or there was at one point in time and it's solvable, I would go for it. If there is something wrong with the roof itself, like the structure or the way it's been laid out, then that's a no, because that's a much bigger problem. Well, it's a no at a certain price, it's a yes if you're going to give me a discount on the property, right? Like the way I see a lot of problems is like I'll take it if it's within my skill set and within my budget, right? Like you will discount me, you know, 30K if I've got a structural problem, and we've done this before. We bought a townhouse at King West, which was actually leaning, like you can see it from the outside, but we got it for $950, and now townhouses are selling fully renovated for $2 million in that neighborhood. So yeah, I'll do it. Like, I'll take a structural problem, because even if I have $50,000 worth of restructuring to do, there's still room there to make money. Right. Any other questions before we head to the downstairs unit? Chris, do you have any staged questions for me to?
No, I think I'm good for now. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. One thing I'll talk about here is like, what could I do to make this property better? Not very much, right? And so I think this is great if you're house hacking, if you're living in a unit and you're renting out the other two, or you know your intentions are something of personal use. But if you're looking for this, you know, because in the future you're planning to expand, this is not the place to do it. I don't have laneway potential here. If you're looking for higher upside potential, this is not the place. But if you're looking for entry level investment, then this is something more to consider.
And may remind us, how much did this property sell for?
It's listed now for $999.
$999.
Yeah, but it's with offer date.
Yeah, and what do you think you'll go for?
I think I don't know, 115, maybe 12. It's a hot market. It's really hard to tell. Sometimes we get offer nights and there's like 1 or 2 offers coming through, but we just had a 30 offer night and a 20 offer night this past week. So
it's changed a lot recently.
Oh my goodness. So like a month ago, I was closing on the 5 cap, if you guys are familiar with cap rates, 5 cap turnkey properties in the city. Now we're fighting 20, 30 offers. And it's because there's this now general sentiment of stability in interest rates. And, you know, Toronto's got a lot of wealthy people, and they're trying to find a safe place to keep their money. So we're seeing cap rates dropping again very quickly, and the return of offer nights.
I guess we'll talk about numbers later, but I like numbers. I'm just waiting for lunch. But something like this, where like, will the cash flow is it be tight, or you just total ROI be positive? But
we'll go through the numbers at lunch, but I can tell you, just because I've done so much of this, this place will be no. For cash flow positive, no. At a 5.5% interest rate, 30-year AM. Like, and the reason is, I can tell you, we don't have enough square footage here. I need at least 2-bedroom layouts to get cash flow neutral these days at a 5.5% interest rate. So at like 1.5 million, about 7,500 in rents is what I need in total. And this place will fall, I think, about 50% of those rents, even at, it would have to be 50% of the cost then, right? And definitely not selling for 750. So.
What's the square footage?
I don't know, but when I look at it, my guess would be about, maybe about 600 a floor, because it's not a super tight, 550, 600 a floor. Yeah. Do you guys want to go downstairs? We can check that out. Cool. It's going to be fun swapping 2 groups on the stairs.
I was trying to get into
It's a landlord's disaster. Like, you need a bigger house for that. Yeah. Right? There you go. What do you use it for? There you go. It's Airbnb.
And in Toronto, you'll see a shared driveway, neutral driveway. So what you would have to go through is something called an LDA, a limiting distance agreement. So you don't even have to go through city approval for that. You just have to go through your neighbor, and they have to agree to have an LDA on their title. And when they have an LDA on their title, then you're allowed to go regardless from your home. Yeah. Does that make sense? Yeah.
That's sharing to get to the garden suite.
Sharing, yeah, you're sharing that separation to get to your garden suite. Because if your lot line to your house is not 90 centimeters, you need to clear that 90 centimeters, right? So the other way to do it is use some of your neighbor's space.
So you could look up what's on title now at your place and see if previous.
Yeah,
it's unlikely.
Yeah, because they won't really want to put it out the like for what reason, right? Like,
It's almost like an easement on your title. So it's a detractor. But you know we've successfully negotiated them before. Yeah. I mean, generally speaking, you don't have garden suites are not as common in Toronto. In the areas that we service, in what we deem the best investable areas in Toronto. Why? Why would garden suites not be as common in like the downtown core area?
The lots are.
Yeah, you're looking at
Lots. It's the lots, right? So if you're up in the 905, I consider kind of the outskirts of Toronto, anything north of like or anything north of like St. Clair. But anyway, once you start going up into midtown and stuff like that, you start getting driveways, and you start getting normal suburban bigger houses, and you're not dealing with the 18 to 20 foot lots that we deal with here in the downtown core, which means there's side setbacks and. Actually, more importantly, they don't have laneways.
Yeah.
So in Toronto proper, we have laneways, generally speaking, for parking. This is the most common thing you can find for parking. It's not parking on your front driveway, and it's generally not mutual driveways, although I have a property that has a mutual driveway, but they're not very common, which means garden suites are not going to be very common, which means laneway suites are generally going to be the answer for most people when they're investing in downtown. You don't have to worry about garden suites too much.
No garden suites, but
laneway suites. Yeah. So that's where you've got the lane, and you come park off the lane.
And then what would be the minimum lot width you would need to build
something good?
Something
decent
that's worthwhile.
So
there's no standard for a minimum lot width, but you're looking for an ideal. Because the thing is, the wider the lot, the more you build, right? Because you can build lot line to lot line for your laneway suite. So what we're looking for is a wider lot, and what a wide lot really would be. We're aiming for like a 12 to 1400 square foot laneway suite. So in that, you'd want a lane, a width of 18, 20?
A minimum 18,
right?
20.
This one's 20. Yeah.
So 18 to 20 is generally what we're looking for, and then you look at lot depth, and then you've got to look at distance to the main house, the rear wall of the main house. Like there's 101 different things to look for. Looking for trees. I mean, trees can obstruct it. Are you allowed to injure the tree versus kill the tree? Right? There's a whole. Is the tree bigger than 12 centimeters? 12 inches or 30
centimeters diameter. Yeah.
Like all those types of things, right?
So, yeah. So those are major things you're looking for, like setback from the main house, 7.5 meters, does have lane access, big trees on the lot. And then if you don't have a laneway of garden suite, do you have 90 centimeters from your main house to your lot line so that emergency services can get.
But to answer your question, from a business model perspective, what you're looking for, as Wilson pointed out, is 12 to 1400 square feet ideally. Why? When you're in that range, you can get a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. The 3-bedroom, 2-bath will yield you anywhere from $4,000 to $4,500 in rent. For a build that only costs you $500,000 to $600,000. $500,000 to $600,000 to generate $4,000 in rent. Those numbers are fucking bonkers. You can't find those numbers in Toronto anywhere else. You'd have to go to like small town Ontario to go get those type of rent yields, right? And so it makes a lot of sense. You might pay roughly a 10% premium for a lot that has laneway suite potential. You may pay a premium, call that $150,000, and so the land basis might be a little bit higher, but generally speaking, from a business model perspective, it makes a ton of sense. The trick is, and I know you guys already know this, but the trick is right now, the hard part is financing. The hard part's financing. I mean, the hard part is also construction again, right? But the hard part is financing. Why? You might be able to build this thing, but then if your aspirations were to refinance, do an equity takeout, because you're going to create a lift in the property, and you're going to create a whole bunch more rent. But if you can't refinance and take the equity back out in order to go and invest again, you might be stuck. Right now, there are very few options / no options to refinance with the laneway suite. Right? We're literally at the forefront right now, working with mortgage brokers and lenders on a pilot program, trying to solve this for investors. If you're a normal homeowner or whatever, generally you may not refinance, so that's fine. You just collect $4,500 in rent and you're super happy. And that's part of your aspirations too, go build. Great. But the problem is, if your aspirations is to roll forward, you may not want to build this right now because you might not have an exit. So, unless you want to, if it takes 12 months to build, there's a chance in 12 months there might be a financing solution, and appraisers might know how to appraise them, and lenders might know how to lend on them by that point. You're taking a little bit of a risk, right? It will happen. It'll just take some time. So that's my caveat when building a laneway suite. What's important now? Acquire good parcels of land with laneway suite potential.
Yeah,
exactly.
Very important.
Right? That's going to be the key to right now, as opposed to necessarily going out and building it.
I wonder, once financing comes into play and it becomes standard that you can refinance, would it not increase the value?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
You may see a huge flood of people flooding into properties that have laneway suite potential. Yes.
Yeah. So Vancouver's had it for the last, I think, 7 or 8 years, and that market has been just like builders going bonkers with laneway suites. And that's very important, right? Because the major developers in the city, they're not building fast enough because we have a housing supply issue, right? So you have all these plots of land that could be built in an additional unit, but a big developer's not going to do it. So they're going to leave it up to the small developer to do these extra suites. And this is where we come in. Like this is, you as an investor, you should be capitalizing on these lots. Like you're looking for diamonds in the rough. Like right now, it's just starting in Toronto, right? So, and clearly there's a housing supply issue. So that's what you should be looking for, laneway suite potential.
Did everyone get a chance to walk through? So obviously we're not pointing out pretty colors and, well, there's a barn door there. Oh, cool. I'm gonna, right? That's not the kind of shit that we do. Obviously, we don't need to tell you whether this is a nice, it's a nice place to live or how attractive it is. We want to give you the elements that pertain to the investment as it pertains to the business model and your overall investment strategy, rather than, oh, we like the tile, we like the countertops, right? Cool. Any other questions? So this is a small house, actually. It's a tiny bit disappointing because on paper it seemed to have the potential we were looking for, right? We thought, oh, it's got a bedroom, it's got a bathroom, it's got a dining room, a living room, bathroom. A typical house, this is actually not laid out very typically. A typical house, if you're familiar with downtown Toronto houses, is you walk in through the main floor, there's a living room, dining room, kitchen, maybe a powder. You walk upstairs, bedroom, bathroom. That's a pretty typical house, right? The bedrooms upstairs, 3 bedrooms, if it's converted, typically what they'll do is convert one into a kitchen, and then you'll have one as a living room, one as a bedroom. So that turns into a 1-bedroom apartment on the 2nd floor. If it's any bigger, sometimes we have an extra bedroom or more space where we can actually get another bedroom. It's important to have at least some common living space. We don't always need a dining room, right? We can combine that with living. But it's important to have some common area, because if you don't, you're only going to get 2 separate roommates, right? And that's not our ideal tenant profile. That might be okay from a rent perspective, but it's not ideal from a profile we're looking for, right? So this doesn't fit that bill at all. This is a very strange layout. Not strange. It's a different layout. And so even the way the stairs, kind of turn 90 degrees up into here. This is a stranger layout, and the house is very small. We looked at this, on paper. We looked at this and we were like, oh, cool. It's got like a separate, living room and dining room. Oh, maybe we can do something with it. Maybe we can. Actually, it's too small of a house. And the floor plates, if the floor plates don't work, if they're too small, you can't do what you want with it, it's very expensive to do extensions and top-ups and stuff like that. Again, if it's part of your business model, part of your operational excellence, and part of your strategy to do all that, great. For the most part, if you're coming in for turnkey or fairly turnkey with cosmetic renos only, kitchens, baths, flooring, just easy stuff. This would be limiting in that ability. Right? That said,
and that's in addition to the slope making your living room making it.
What do you mean in addition to?
You said that was a big issue, right?
It is. So yes, absolutely. And then we're always looking for. We should get going? Okay. And then we're always looking for good, solid houses. You know what they say in houses that have good bones? They're thinking about things like, foundations and, stuff that we don't want to spend big money on those things necessarily. We want to acquire where we can come in and add value. Where we add value, like tenants aren't really going to care if you put in a kick-ass roof or a kick-ass furnace. They don't care about that. They care is I really love the backsplash. I really like that quartz countertop. Those are the things you want to spend money on. So if you can find a place that has good bones, then come in and just do those things. Fixing structural is not going to be something a tenant's going to come in.
How do you know that would be structural? If it's an extension, don't they usually just settle downwards if it's been there for 100 years plus?
Well, I mean, it settles downward because the foundations weren't done properly from the get-go, right? So, foundations, it could be slab on grade, right? It could be built on stilts. It could be not built with a proper foundation at all, right? We don't know those things. We're going to have to take a deeper dive into it, or we just say we nix this from the list because we already know it's going to be a big ticket item.
Is it possible that it could just be to an extent cosmetic, where it is kind of it's settled differently, but you don't need to fix it, or you always need to address it?
You don't have to do anything, right? If you are okay with that, there's the potential of it getting worse over time, right? Like an extension, is it literally going to separate from the house? We've seen stuff where literally it settles and it separates from the house, causing bigger issues. We look for those types of things. That's why we look for plumbness of the wall. We look for horizontal cracking in the brickwork. Those things are all indications of foundation and structural issues. If you're happy not dealing with it, that's fine too. As long as you understand that going in eyes wide open.
So who has access to the rear of the property, the backyard? So it depends on how you as a landlord have divided it up. So we're usually very clear on lease who gets access. Is it exclusive use or is it shared use? It's easiest to keep things exclusive because then you don't have tenant-tenant interaction, which is always problematic. So likely, it's probably the ground unit that has access to the back, because that's how I would do it. And if they become friends, they can always invite them down to use it, but it still is the exclusive use of the ground unit.
I've heard people mentioning the sloping at the back of this house.
Yes.
It doesn't bother me, but I wonder how many people would bother.
So, okay, let me tell a little bit of story. It's very common in Toronto. You'll see this. I bet you will see it at the next house. I could be wrong. I haven't been in there, but it's very, very common to see these. I'll call them half-ass extensions at the back of Toronto properties. And the reason is the history of these homes. Remember, they're all 100-plus-year-old homes. This is before refrigeration, modern refrigeration. So they all had cellars in the basement, unfinished, cold cellars. The way you get to them is you go outside, you open up the door, and you go down a ladder to get into your cellar. Over the years, they've built over those cellar entrances because they don't want to go outside. And then they're trying to make the basement more and more usable over the years. So you get these like little extensions at the back, which are basically just covered cellar entrances. Oftentimes, they're just put together by whoever lived here at that time. So they're not the best. They're slopey sometimes. It doesn't necessarily mean they're not safe, but they're not built to the same rigor as somebody, as a professional, right? Because even, 40, 50 years ago when they probably did it, this was like a $100,000 home at best, maybe a $50,000 home, blue collar worker, maybe working at one of the factories down by the lake. So it was probably themselves and their buddies got together and cobbled together that cover for the cellar entrance. So it's very common, very common that they're like slopey and whatever. I take them as a case by case basis, right? So we're doing a project just east of here. Has one of these extensions at the back. We're keeping the bottom level of that extension, but we're redoing the second and third level of that extension because they did it 3 stories, right? It just felt like a dangerous place. So when we were going through and doing the budgeting for it, we're like, hey, let's budget to redo that extension.
Why didn't you just redo everything then?
Cost. Yeah, because we can keep it was structurally fine actually. So once we actually were able to rip off the drywall and look at it, it was structurally fine. It just wasn't put together precisely, right? No laser measures, none of that stuff back in the day, right? So they're like trying to make it straight like that. So it did slope down, and then to make it more durable, they didn't put plywood because that didn't exist. They actually took sheets of metal and put them on the floor. So it gave this weird. It felt a little strange, right? Like walking into a metal box on the second floor. And especially for what we're targeting for, one of these high-end luxury rentals, that won't fly, right? So that came down. We changed the roof line as well, made it flat so that way the third floor, we've got a nice deck on the third.
I can hear some rumbling on the ground.
Yeah.
Was it
Yeah.
Was it subway?
That's a subway.
Yeah, it's probably.
It's a subway.
So I'm not sure exactly, but it's caused by 2 things. What you'll get more rumble from is generally subway. The actual subway runs north of Bloor, right? So it doesn't run right underneath. It's actually about 20 or 30 meters north of the street itself. And you'll see if you ever look on Google Maps, there's this like corridor all along Bloor of like parking and parkettes and like stuff where there's not construction directly over top the subway line, right? You still do get some like buildings on top of the subway line, but there's not that many. And that sound will travel usually about up to about 100, maybe 150 meters from the subway tunnel itself. And you get some sort of rumbling. Does it affect our tenant profile and rentability? It depends on how bad it is and being transparent on it. Remember, people are living in the city. They are used to noise. They're not expecting it to be dead quiet here. Otherwise, it won't be downtown. But it's always best when you're taking your tenant profile through the property to be like, hey, there's subway noise here. Let's stand around for a couple of minutes. Make sure you hear it. Make sure you're okay with it, right?
What kind of heating system is that? Is it forced air?
Here's forced air. Not super. I was gonna say not super common. Maybe about like 50%, 60% of the places we see downtown are forced air. The other 40%, maybe like 75 of that is boilers. Especially when you get into the bigger properties, you'll see more boiler systems. And then a smaller percentage of that. Some are electrical. Some are if they're renovated, you get like hydronic systems and things like that. So this place is forced air though. But boilers are also very common.
So the basement's finished or not?
Basement's finished and it's tenanted. Yeah.
Same
So we're
size this one or same size upstairs?
the furnace? Oh, basement is smaller. Yeah. Basement doesn't include that extension at the back, so you can it's more similar to upstairs. But yeah. Amber?
When you're looking at these types of properties, are you more interested in tenanted properties or non-tenanted properties?
That's an excellent question. So it depends, but in general, I prefer vacant possession for a couple of reasons. One, typically when they're tenanted, they're not at market rents, just in general. You do find places that have been rented out more recently. They've found the right tenant profiles that we're looking for, and they are at top rents. And that does happen for our clients. We've done 2 recently, which are like that. But in general, we're not that lucky. They haven't done a great job on tenant screening, or they've been there a long time. And I rather, our team do the. I asked our team to help with my rentals, but that our team do our own tenant screening because I trust our process a lot more. We're a little crazy, I think, when it comes to our tenant due diligence. Stuff like when we're doing employee verification, we don't call the number that they've given us. We Google it, and then we contact their HR department independently, so we're not calling up their buddy to say that they actually work there. Then we verify through false information, like, hey, says here, let's say he wrote down he earns 100K. We'll say, oh yeah, hey, it says here that he earns 160. Now, technically, they can only tell you true or false, but oftentimes HR folks will be like, oh, that's not correct. He actually earns 100. We had one instance a couple of years ago where we did this through false verification, and the other side was like, oh, actually, he's getting a promotion soon, so he'll be earning X number of dollars. And then I was like, great. And she's like, I don't know if he knows, so don't say anything. Oftentimes HR is not following the rules that they're supposed to be following themselves. But that's how we do it. And I don't necessarily know that the other side's as crazy as we are about doing these things.
Are these renovated units under rent control? Is it?
This would be, yes. So to be not under rent control, you need what's called a significant renovation, or the introduction of a new property type after 2019 or 2018? 18. So you guys know. But that would be the cutoff date. So this place, probably not. And if you renovate it, it'd have to be significantly nicer. So they're basically looking for a 90% change of the property, right? Or you're changing the purpose, so it goes from a 1-bedroom to like a 2-bedroom, right? Then you can say it's not under our control. Which is why we really care about our tenant profile. They naturally turn over. We don't want somebody who's kind of staying there all the time. That's why we're so after these areas and neighborhoods and stuff like that.
This is obviously not the foundation. This is just a covering for the foundation. So I would probably want to do take a deeper look to see what's actually under here.
Because the basement is not coming all the way to this point. It's like in the middle of the house, no?
So yeah, so we can see that this is an extension. The basement could have also been extended. It may or may not be.
Unlikely if it's settling.
That's just it. Yeah. Like it's unlikely they did, because otherwise they'd have to do the foundations really properly in order, like they would be digging out the basement, redoing the foundations, possibly underpinning, and that's a much bigger job. Yeah. Here, I think they just literally extended it. I don't know what type of foundation they had here. I was trying to pull that.
No, the width. See if you can see what's underneath.
Yeah, I was trying.
Is it like blocks?
It's more. I see more brick here, but literally, like, it's pretty obvious they didn't do this well.
Yeah.
Right? So this is just, probably a DIY type of job.
So very quickly too, if you're looking this way. Sorry, are you done?
No.
You can do the way.
Oh, well, sorry. Just the last thing. So we were talking about distance to the main house. For example, you can see that this person extended further. So then the question is, from here, do you have 7.5 meters or 24.5 feet to where you need to go in order to build a laneway suite?
From him or from?
No,
from yours. But just as an example, they extended the main house. They created more square footage in the main house. Great. We've actually seen instances where it makes sense to amputate the main house in order to get the laneway suite. Right?
Sacrifice a little
because
to get a lot.
The reason being, because if the extension was only a 1-story extension, you may be able to get 2 stories of laneway suite square footage back if the property, if you needed 7.5 meters from the main house. Right?
And
So,
also,
like,
no large trees here, right? We have a big tree here, but this is close enough to the house where it's not impeding your laneway suite build.
Does it impede like any emergency crews coming here? Because it'll
So
be kind
that-
of hard to bring the equipment over, right?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
If you had access, because you have a lane back there, if you had
Yeah.
access to the fire hydrant
This is the garage.
within less than 90
90
meters,
meters. Yeah.
then you could do it. But if you didn't, you need 90 centimeters of clearance from your front curb to your laneway suite.
So I just want to give you, again, ninja level shit for with regards to laneway suite. So, laneway suite, we like laneway suites that are 12 to 1,400 square feet. That's not always possible. We see a lot of stuff that's like, you know, you can get like 900 and 1,100, whatever, or 1,000. Ideally, 12 to 1,400 square feet. Obviously, you'll pay a premium for a lot like that too, because hell, you can build a massive laneway suite. 12 to 1,400 square feet is the size of most interior main building Toronto homes, right? Like 6 to 7. Tim knows. 600 to 700 square feet per floor is pretty common, right? Like that's literally the size you can build in a laneway. Some people opt to put a garage still on the main floor. You gotta get going? Okay, I'll wrap up in 20 seconds. Some people still want a parking spot, right? We have a client who actually said, oh, I still want a parking spot. We're like, it doesn't make good financial sense. He's like, I don't care, I'm living there and I want a garage. Okay, fine. From an investment perspective, you don't need a garage necessarily. What we do, we can't get back there, but just follow my logic. There's a lane that's going this way, right? And so your rear lot line goes right up into the lane. You need roughly 5 feet as a setback from your rear lot line. That's where your laneway suite starts. Okay, even if your garage is there right now, when you rebuild it, you have to pull it back 5 feet. Now, if you pulled it back an additional 3 feet, that's 8 feet. 8 feet, 8.5 feet is generally what you need for a parking spot in terms of the width of a car. So, and the width of these lots are 18 to 20 feet. The way this all works out, pull back an extra 3 feet and call it a 20 foot lot. The 3 feet times 20 foot, I mean, that's 60 square feet. If you were to pull it back an additional 3 feet, you'd lose 60 square feet on the interior. But what you gain is an informal parking spot. It's like a parking pad where you could literally parallel park up against the laneway, the entrance to the laneway suite from the lane. So that's it's not a legal one. It's an informal parking pad. And then the second floor can overhang, and you can get that square footage back. So it's a really sophisticated and creative technique to still get a parking spot. It's not an interior like a garage, but you're not losing a ton of square footage, but you're gaining a shit ton of value. Right? Those are the types of things that we do to maximize value. You know, if it's a personal considerations, you want a garage, sure, make a garage. But if you don't, that's one way to still get a parking spot without losing too much square footage.
Give up a little, get a lot. That's what
exactly.